Hello and welcome to another Rewind review. We are taking a look at episode 7. Is it episode 7? Yeah, episode 7, the art gallery car. This is actually the second time I'm recording this, because the first time, during lockdowns, Nadia has been working from home, which means I no longer have 100% access to the office that I used to record all my podcasts in, which is like an isolated room where I could shut the door and no sounds would get in, or not no sounds, but less sounds. So now I'm often having to record, if it's in the daytime, in the week, outside, because sadly my podcasts aren't as important as paid work that my better half has. It would be hard for me to justify kicking her out of the office to record one of these. So I'm in the living room, which is actually quite close to the room where we keep well, it's not close, but it's closer to the room we have our washing machine. So it was on during the last recording, and quite frankly, you can hear it the entire time I'm speaking. I might as well have not bothered. It's quite irritating. It's quite loud. I didn't think the mic was picking it up as much as it was, so I carried on, finished recording, and then checked it. I was like, oh, no, I can't subject anybody to that. So I'm going to say all the things I said again. You never know. Maybe I'll be more concise somehow this time. That won't happen. So let's take a look at this episode, the art gallery car. I like this episode on the whole. I think it's a really good setup for where they go next. It's an interesting one because I do think it's Infinity Train's in a weird spot sometimes, because the idea is that the train is guiding these people on their journeys, but from a storytelling perspective, obviously you need to guide the characters to certain points on a journey to make a story function. So in the hero's journey, you have all those different sort of stages where your hero, your main character, has a thing they wish to achieve, various obstacles which can take the form of an antagonist, or even just various things getting in the way of them achieving that goal. And the way it would normally work is your first act is them maybe refusing the call initially to adventure and then getting off on the adventure to go achieve the thing. The second act is usually an escalation of barriers and things blocking it, whether that be struggles against a direct antagonist, another person, or, as I said earlier, other obstacles, eventually culminating in what's sort of known as the lowest point at the end of the second act, where the character is even if not 100% defeated in terms of there's still a chance to rescue things, they're emotionally at their absolute lowest point. It sometimes literally means their lowest point as well, like it's like the point in which it seems the goal seems the furthest away, they get knocked back down, you know, that sort of thing. But the end of the second act is your emotional lowest point. Now this series, particularly book 4, has borrowed that structure. Used that. Everything ultimately uses that structure. It's so thin, malleable. It can really be applied to anything, and it's 99% of stories you see use this structure. So we're at the end of Act 2 with this episode, because at the end of this episode, their relationship is at its most damaged. Min is the most upset he's been with Ryan. And which is always more heartbreaking. They usually do this as well in like a lot of the stories, which is where you bring the character up, you make it look like they're going to achieve it right before you give them their lowest point. And last week, obviously, we had such a sweet moment at the end with the two characters coming together. This is a really heartbreaking episode, but there is a slight but. The problem you have with this show, and I say this isn't something necessarily the writers have done or could do anything about. This is just the nature of this show, is the train is influencing events always, right? That's the implication, is that the train it's not a coincidence they ended up in this car, and it's not a coincidence that at the end of this episode we get this very deliberate setup where Ryan is got Min in trouble and his door on the other side, and he's presented with the option to make a choice, and he hesitates, which is the wrong choice, and his number goes back up. That's brilliant. That's great writing. It's wonderful. The problem, I think, is that because the train is always manipulating events, you get situations like this where that was Ryan. I might have said Min. Sorry, that was Ryan that had the option to go through the door. Min was in trouble, and he chose. He hesitated. He considered just leaving Min, and I'll go through the whole episode in a little bit more detail, just to give anyone who's listening to this at a later date some recap. But my point, I suppose, if we're talking overall thoughts on this episode is I thought it did a really good job of getting us to that point where they're at their lowest, but there was something kind of artificial about it, which is a situation you're going to get into with the train like this, but it's from a storytelling perspective, it kind of affects it. And what I'm talking about is Min doesn't see Ryan struggle with that decision. What Min's upset about at the end is that Ryan left him, which I did say in my previous recording of this was pretty rich coming from a guy that's left Ryan high and dry 2 times now. But I guess from his perspective, even though he didn't do the gig, he maybe didn't expect Ryan to then leave him and go on the tour without him. So I guess he maybe felt like, they both kind of feel like they've left each other at certain points. And the thing that gets Ryan's number down to 0 at this is when he says to Min, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to leave you again. So maybe he even feels a little guilty about that, and the door opens. His number hits 0. Then he looks through it and he considers his options. And that moment where he even thinks about the possibility of leaving Min proves he hasn't learned that lesson, and the number goes back up. And this is all designed by the car. But when Min comes out, he's not mad about any of that. What Min is mad about is that Ryan left him in the first place. But the problem with that is Ryan didn't choose to leave him. Ryan didn't choose not to be able to go back. That was the design of the car. When you see the door, it doesn't open a door that he could step through and that Min could see him stepping through and then follow. It was a different setup for the car, where when you solve the puzzle, you're just zapped out without being able to say anything. Ryan didn't have a choice. He was just trying to figure out the puzzle. He didn't know how the car how that would then work. For all he knew, when he lined up the items and the door appeared, it would literally make a door in the wall that he could then head through with. You just don't know, right? So he didn't make a choice to leave Min in that moment. So Min's mad about the wrong thing. And it just is unfortunate that because of the way that that's all designed, the drama, the upset of Min at the end of this episode feels a little... It doesn't have the impact it should, because he's not mad about the right thing. You know what I mean? He's mad for the wrong reason. He's mad for something that Ryan literally couldn't help. So it does feel a little artificial. It feels a little forced. But again, that's the point, because the train is forcing that. The train is creating these situations artificially to ensure that these people are... it's not a coincidence that the door worked like that, where you go out and then you've abandoned the other person and he could see back through, but he couldn't get back through. It's all designed very specifically. So, yeah, on the whole... I think this is a really solid episode with some really great jokes, but I think the that character thing at the end, I just feel like it, sadly, because he ended up being mad about the wrong thing, it weakened that emotional beat for me. But we're still in a really good place, and we're potentially going forward with some very exciting stuff. So let's break this down a little bit more specifically. All in all, a lot of really cool creative ideas in this episode. It's actually a surprisingly funny episode. There's a lot of really good character stuff in this. We get sort of clarification on a lot of the reasons these two characters have fallen out, which I thought was really important stuff that we were covering. The first thing you notice when they get into that car is the "Mind the Docent" sign. So I think that word has different meanings in different languages. Like in some languages, it literally is like a title they give to like university professors, like teachers, I think. But I think the American English version of a docent is like a museum volunteer, like somebody who has knowledge in a subject that shows up at the museum maybe on weekends and volunteers their time to give tours and inform people coming to see the thing. So like if you were a paleontologist, the equivalent, you'd be a docent if you were volunteering your time to go to the museum at the weekends and show groups of tourists or visitors the various things and explain what they are, and use your knowledge that way. The actual definition that I found online when I double checked was docents are volunteer teachers who provide group learning experiences in the form of museum tours, demonstrations, or instruction in special activity areas. Now, some of you are thinking, why are you talking about what that is? There isn't a docent in this car. The sign just says that. Well, even though this creature doesn't make any noise and is therefore not voiced and is therefore not credited, but I am willing to bet that if we were to probe Owen Dennis about the creature that appears in this episode that menaces our two main characters, I suspect they may have dubbed it the docent. I will definitely be referring to it as that going forward. But I have a strong feeling that's how the crew thought of it too. So when it says mind of the docent, it literally means mind, because it's a different kind of creature. So it's not it's teaching, but it's teaching in a very different way. It is letting them tour the museum, and it is letting them learn things as they go, but it's learning things about themselves. So what it basically seems to have the power to do is those negative thoughts that you have. Every time something happens, I feel like people tend to have both a good and a bad thought about the thing. They always have the potential positive thought and then like a negative one underneath, because everyone's always constantly evaluating everything from all angles. And it feels like the docent just brings out that negative one, but specifically when it's in regards to your thoughts about other people. So, immediately Min is the first one affected by it. He's, suddenly spewing all these negative thoughts he has about Ryan, and wanting to be alone. It also makes him cold, and it's visually represented by these shadowy hand things that sort of move through and like are visible on their body, but they don't seem to be able to see themselves. It's this presence that's felt throughout the whole episode. It's actually before we get to the final design of it, which is creepy for a completely different reason, I think it is quite a menacing thing throughout the episode. It's just this constant presence that's literally shadowing everything, and it really does give the episode quite a menacing and sort of what's the word I'm looking for, like a creepy vibe. I don't know if creepy is the right word, but the right word isn't occurring to me, and I can't sit here all day waiting for it to. So I will move on. So yeah, I think it's a really good idea, because it basically allows us to clarify that these two characters are sort of so similar but so different that they've ended up in this situation where they're like... The moment in this episode that kind of blew my mind is, so what this thing does, it makes them want to... At first it makes Min go away. Like, Min wants to just be alone. He just leaves. He's just like, I don't want to deal with it. And then eventually it starts to affect Ryan too. And Ryan also sort of goes separate, and then Kez kind of becomes this source of comedy, but also a go-between between the two characters, because they're not really speaking in this episode, which is funny because the episode does start with them on really good terms and turns that really quickly. And the way they get away with that here is by having, again, it's not a coincidence that they were starting to get on. Let's throw another obstacle in their way in the form of this car. The car very much. The train knew which car they were coming to next, and I feel like it was very much by design. But it brings out the worst in Min in terms of like his thoughts for Ryan, and he basically is saying, that his problems become my problems. So singing one song doesn't fix 18 years of letdowns, which I thought was rich, coming from a guy who's let Ryan down visibly, physically twice now. But, again, I do think what I think makes these characters so authentic and so rich, and why I'm so connected, not connected, but why I like watching these two so much, is I think there is an authenticity to their contradictions. I think real people are complicated, and their thoughts and feelings shift so frequently. They're so unsure all the time on many things, and even people, that it can create what seem like contradictions in what they're saying versus their behavior, or hypocrisies where they say something that someone else has done and they don't see it in themselves. There's something very authentic about that, and both these characters are experiencing that, right? They're seeing things in the other that they don't see in themselves. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that there are two occasions in this episode where Min criticizes Ryan for letting him down when he's done the same. It's very well designed. And this episode really, having the last episode where we sort of like, they kind of made up, but they never really actually dealt with the issues. They just remembered why they were friends in the first place, which is sweet, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? The number went down, but it didn't go to zero. This episode is like, well, now let's deal with your problems. Let's actually get it all out in the open. And again, while it doesn't add anything like hugely new in terms of dimensions to the argument, it does, like I said, clarify a lot of it for me and a lot of what they disagree with. But what I thought was interesting was hearing them. So, like, Ryan, Ryan says he couldn't even perform for, a bunch of people he's never going to see again, a bunch of, beings he's never going to see again, on this like magic train, like, so he's dead weight. Like, I refuse to end up just like him. I'm actually going to make something of myself. And then we turn to Min, who's like, he's not a bad guy, he's just, he's Ryan, and I can't end up like him. So they both see traits in each other they fear they may become if they spend too much time with each other. They both see traits in each other that are so different. Instead of appreciating each other's differences, they're scared of the influence of the other almost. And again, bringing all that out and making that clear in this episode really brings the whole season together, because it's all been little hints and clues here and there. And this is the episode where they get to really sort of like establish exactly what their feelings are towards each other. And again, they are still a little muddled and confused, but only because they're designed that way, because again, they're reacting like real people. And they're really harsh to each other. I think at one point Min says something like, I can't drop everything in my life just because you can't figure out yours, which is, wow, like, you're really harsh. So for the rough structure of the episode, for anyone who doesn't remember, basically they go into the car, it makes them disagree. Kez is forced to be comedy relief, but also like try to bring them together. And then it leads to the ending I already described, where Ryan figures a way out of the car, but doesn't realize it will immediately transport him out and leaves him outside while Min is suffering at the hands of the docent, just horrendous creature we'll come back to. And we end on Min getting out through his own means and sort of being like, you left me. So if that's the rough structure, we've already talked about the stuff that comes out between those two. Let's talk a little bit about Kez in this episode. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that she is brilliant. This episode, she is funny so many times. I loved her having a really intricate, like detailed, like interesting thought on this painting, and then being like, but I don't know, maybe I'll go get a headphone. Let me go get some headphones. I thought that was really good. I loved her screaming. At one point she has this blood-curdling scream to bring the two boys together. It's funny actually, because she does it in such a Kez way. So they're both separate. You hear this scream, and it's a really upsetting scream. I've watched this episode twice, and both times I was like, oh, like it actually made me like want to react, like turn it down, go help, go do something. Like it's like when you hear a baby crying on TV, you just want to do something. You need to stop it. You have an immediate impulse to do that. And so she does this scream that's like really quite upsetting, and then they both run to it, and they're like, what's up? And she's like, oh no, I just do that sometimes, whatever. Anyway, you two are now here and you can talk. So she's quite good in this episode at being funny. Like when she gets the headphones, she's like, there's nothing even for these to plug into, I think it's a scam. And then she chooses to like throw them down and smash them rather than like do anything else with them, just put them down, whatever. I thought that was really funny. Again, she's just constantly a source of comedy in this episode, but there's a couple of details with her that I wanted to talk about. First of all, I think there's a really potentially sad story behind Kez. There's a moment when she goes to speak to Ryan and she starts giving him legit advice, but then she bails on that and then is like, actually, maybe don't rush anything, because she's like trying to tell him to go face the problem, go talk to Min, let's get this out in the open, let's sort it out, which is good, healthy advice if you've got a problem like that with someone. What I think is great about this docent character and the way this car works is it makes you want to be separate as well. So it's almost like it's designed to stop you from being able to actually address your issues directly, and that's actually part of what's so sinister about it. It makes you say what you mean and then not even want to talk about it, and that's like that's a definite way to like upset people. But I kept thinking, what would this car do if the tulip came through it? Like nothing. She'd be a bit snippy with one maybe. I don't know. Like this car feels like, considering this is like the unlikely scenario of two people getting on together, and everyone's commented constantly in the early days of this house everywhere. It's like, did one make this car really quickly? Did he have this? Has this train been going on for so damn long, for so many thousands and thousands and thousands of passengers, that this has occurred one or two other times and this car was already ready for this situation? Well, enough times to have created the being. We'll come back to that. Anyway, but I thought it was really interesting because Kez made that comment and then backed out, because I think she doesn't want them to leave. I think Morgan, her quote-unquote roommate, was another passenger potentially. He had humanoid form in the picture we saw, who she hung out with, and then he got his number down and he left. And I think Kez has similar abandonment issues that we're talking about with these two, where they're talking about the other one, like, man, at the end of this episode, you left me, and Ryan, when he was supposed to join him on stage, he felt he left him. I think Morgan left Kez. I think this is a story of people who left other people, who let their friends down maybe in some way. And obviously Morgan wouldn't have done that intentionally. His number went down, but I can't imagine that left Kez feeling great about anything. So it's really effective because it ties in so well. It's like, again, this train just pushing to pair up the right people. That, you know, Kez almost needs these two as much as they need Kez to guide them through this journey. It's such a good pairing, and it always is. And it's, again, it's like, all right, it's the writers being clever, but what's cool about this show is the very premise allows that to not feel like the writers being too overt and deliberate. It doesn't feel like the hand of the writer, which is something we talk about on our Avatar podcast, when you can tell what the writer wants to happen and it kind of feels forced. What's great about this is it almost never feels forced, because it's like, well, the train did it because that's the right thing to do, and there's like a, you know, cosmic magic to the train or whatever. I keep calling it that, but like I don't know how else to describe it. So she definitely doesn't want them to leave, and I think that's kind of tragic, and I think we're gonna get to deal with that. How much? I don't know. But I thought it was a really nice moment for her. Another moment for her I want to briefly talk about, if I can, was, I say briefly, God, I've already been talking for 20 minutes. I've still got stuff to cover. Come on, Dan. Speed up. There's a lot going on in this episode. There's a moment when Kez, as she did a few episodes ago, she kisses Ryan on the cheek. Like, last time she kissed Min on the cheek, and he was like, that's surprisingly warm. And it was kind of like a joke. She does it again in this episode, and again, it's played like a joke. But this time I couldn't decide what the purpose for it was. So I think there's three possibilities. Possibility one is just a little running joke, the explanation of which is the train doesn't differentiate when creating denizens between things that should have blood running through their veins and generate warmth and inanimate objects. You know, once it's brought life and sentience to something, it just assigns it like warmth, like living person warmth. You know, digitally, you know, it's just assigned that as an attribute, and therefore that's why she's warm despite being a bell in appearance. And that's just the joke and the explanation, and that's it. The other potential explanation is that they're hinting at something. There's something more to Kez. Maybe my earlier thought about maybe how some denizens do seem separate and different in the way they behave to others. Particularly, I've referred to Samantha the cat as coming across very differently to other denizens. She seems way more self-aware, and Kez seems fairly self-aware too. She speaks in a very vague way, but I wonder if maybe there's something more to Kez, and what the possibility too is that they're hinting at that she is somehow different to other denizens. I would need to have I think if we were going to confirm that it was just that the idea was just that all denizens are assigned warmth regardless, we'd need to have another inanimate object style denizen feel warm, and we haven't had that. So that's the other possibility. The third possibility is that entire joke that was set up a couple episodes ago and then sort of touched on again here was simply to explain Kez's immunity to the docent, because in this episode, the docent has those effects of making people want to be alone, but say exactly how they feel about other people, regardless of, brings out the worst in them in terms of their thoughts on others. But it also does make them cold. They're constantly breathing cold air when it's affecting them. And by the way, the design on the shadowy hands moving around them stuff is just super cool. Something I really enjoyed all episode. But what I thought was interesting was there's a scene where the hand goes on Kez and she doesn't react at all. So were they setting up her being warm just to explain why she's not affected by the docent? If that's the case, can I just say, I appreciate the writer's efforts on that part, but I wouldn't have even questioned it because I would have, in my head, automatically dismissed Kez as being affectable by a car like this, because I would just go, she's a denizen, she doesn't count. Like, this car would only affect presumably passengers, both in its early form when it's just those shadowy hands moving through the paintings and walls and onto our passengers, to our main characters, but also in the end when it's revealed, and this is my next talking point, we'll come to it, the horrifying, spooky, kind of upsetting idea that this particular creature is made up of limbs of its victims who are also passengers. Yeah, it will come to that. So yeah, were they? I would have just assumed as a result of it only ever preying on passengers, I would have just gone like, well, Kez is just immune by being a denizen. But if that is what they were going for, then thumbs up, I guess, because it does also make sense that she has like a natural warmth to her that makes her immune. But it's a bit strange. So yeah, let's talk about this thing then. It's crazy. So for those who didn't notice, and I would understand because I didn't actually spot it first viewing. I was too busy being like mortified by its design in the wider sense. It's a bunch of limbs wrapped together to create this creature that one has many limbs of its own, but the limbs are like the hands are like placed over the face in ways to give you like eyes and a mouth. It's really, really upsetting visually. It's a pretty it's a pretty mad creature. Really cool design. Super spooky on board. What I thought was fun, I say fun. What I thought was upsetting was the second time I viewed it, then I noticed that to be honest with you, I was probably just an idiot. Most people probably spotted this first time because it's not very hidden at all. It's very in the open. I was just enamored by the overall design that I'd missed the detail. That is, many of the hands have numbers. Many of the hands that make up this creature have numbers, meaning that they're from passengers. There's one that's like the number 15, which made me upset because I was just like, that person was clearly close to getting off. There's one that's like 731, and there's one that's like right around the whole arm. Maybe a former Apex member. Oh no, the Apex is, well, time-wise, way before the time of the Apex. Proto-Apex. Anyway, so yeah, I thought the creature was terrifying enough without the numbers that implies it's getting its arms from passengers who have become its victims. But cool. There's another dimension of horror to this thing. So yeah, I thought that was really messed up in the best way, and I really enjoyed that. Other notes, I love the solution. I thought it was a really clever thing to hide the door in the art the way they did. They went to a lot of trouble to make me to sort of give reasons for Ryan to put it together, which I suppose I would have probably without that just gone, well, he's clever enough to have figured it out. But they do a really good job of making you understand his thought process. So the early part of the episode, they're talking about music, and Min's accusing Ryan when they're still on better terms before this docent sort of starts really affecting them. Min says to Ryan, like, oh, you appreciate that song, but you don't appreciate the whole album. You gotta see it in the context of the whole album, and that's what he's sort of thinking about. In the end, he references it again when he's looking at this. For those who don't remember, it's like a puzzle of it's hanging pieces that, when you stand at a certain angle, form the door. And if you reach out while that's formed, you sort of get zapped to outside the train car. And very conveniently, the door behind you isn't a solid one, but one you can see through. It's, again, designed to create maximum drama and tension, and you're unable to go back through to advise your colleagues. So it's almost designed to cause rifts, it seems, this thing. And again, it's in a lesser show you would say that was like the writers kind of being lazy, and it was like hand of the writer just artificially contriving circumstances in which the characters would fall out. But in here, you're like, well, it's the train doing it. And I don't know which it is in reality, but I'm cool to go with the train explanation. Works really well, so who's to complain? So I thought it was a really interesting reversal of the situation, ending on Min being like, you left me, considering the other circumstances. I'm excited to see where that goes, particularly. The door thing. They give him the music reason to figure out how to put the door together, but they also give him the broken headset from earlier when he picks up the pieces, and he sort of is like, oh, these are the pieces of a whole. It's like you see him putting it together. They got to do a lot of work to make that, to give me a lot of the steps that his mind makes to get him to figuring out the puzzle, which honestly, I'm really glad they did, but they almost didn't need to. It was like work extra work they did that they probably didn't need to, because I'd have gone along with them, either one or the other of those two explanations, or none of them, to be honest. If he'd just worked it out, I wouldn't have been offended, but this just makes it better. Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't have lessened my enjoyment of it, but this does. But having it improves it, if that makes sense. So it's a really good idea. Just to talk a little bit about some of the other stuff I spotted. Let me move my mic without making too much noise. A couple of other little details. First of all, I thought Min noticing his number going to 202, I was like, yes, finally the show is acknowledging this, because like I've seen it a few times now. One of the characters has spotted this also, because you get it at one point when he first starts arguing with Ryan, it goes back up to 202, and he's like, 202 again, and I'm like, yes, okay, so I'm not crazy. That is a thing. There definitely is something going on there. Whether it's just a vague cosmic, that's the number, or whether there's actually going to be some sort of explanation at a later time in the show, I don't know. But either way, I'm glad the characters have at least acknowledged it now. I loved Ryan trying to outthink the train when he was just like, I figured, we've been enough of these cars now. They're magic portal paintings. And he tries to leap into one, he just sort of hits it. Excellent. Just great comedy. This episode's really funny. This season in general, I think, has been really good for the comedy. I mean, they're always funny, but I guess this one stands out as being funnier next to the previous season, which I think had pulled back a little on the comedy intentionally because of what it needed to do to maintain its tone and its tonal balance. This season is balanced differently and therefore has more freedom to be funny. So I don't know if this season is like funnier than all the other seasons, or if it just seems funnier in comparison to 3, but the comedy has been absolutely top notch all this series. There's an implication that they've had other cars now, which was the first time we've had that, so that kind of throws my slight theory out the window, because I said on the last one that maybe the idea is that we're just seeing every car they're going into, so we can imply only a couple of days have passed, and they've definitely done a lot less starting episodes with their mid-adventure than the previous seasons, or they've done less hints that they've done loads of other stuff in between the cars we're seeing. But this is the first time they did it, where they talk about the roller skate car or something like that, and there's a really sweet moment actually that not only does it imply other adventures are happening, but it also, there's like a moment between Min and Ryan where Min's like complimenting Ryan on something he was playing, and he's like, oh, I thought you were asleep. He's like, oh, if you were awake you could have joined me with the thing, and Min's like, no, it's just showing that there's still some awkwardness there before the episode really gets going, which I love. So yeah, that's a really good thing. I still hope that they get back with enough time to do this gig, but it may just be that they get back and they book another gig or go on that tour finally, rather than playing the gig that they were originally getting on the train to go to New York to do. Maybe too much time has passed. I do think this will be... I think they're kind of intending for less time to have passed with these guys than previously, because I think it was like in the end it was like 6 months past where Tulip was missing, and it was I remember he said it was supposed to be quite a large period of time that Jesse was missing as well. So I think the idea is that when these guys get back, I think at most they'll claim like a week or two have passed. I think that might be why they've done less of that this year. We will see, of course. In other details that I noticed, I really enjoyed some of the stuff we saw in the paintings. I think I saw a Randall, Randall face in one of the paintings, which implies that it was the water used for the paints was Randall or a part of a Randall, and therefore his face wound up in the painting, the way his face ended up in that ocean of Randalls from the first season, which was a really subtle thing that I only spotted. God, it was a long time after I saw it. I think somebody shared it on Twitter. I thought that was really neat. I thought that was fun. Two other things I noticed in the paintings. I did notice there's one that was a Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty the egg. Not an egg. We've established this. That was fun. I really like that too. Just a little hint that just little links to their actual lives. And then one of the paintings, and I'll put the picture up here in the video. One of the paintings looks like a sort of khaki bottoms, but with a different color palette, which I thought was interesting. I think they were just obviously like they were just looking for designs. Like he's the same species as khaki bottoms, the same species of denizen as khaki bottoms, but he just looks different color wise. But it's like he's wearing the same outfit, it's the same shape, it's got the hat, everything, even the patches. So it's a khaki bottoms of some sort. And it's funny because I looked khaki bottoms up to confirm that I wasn't going crazy when I spotted that. And when I did, I saw the two pictures of him in the first season and him when he appeared in the second season next to each other on the Google Images. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I've noticed this before. I probably did and probably already talked about it. But if I didn't, I'll say it here. Khaki Bottoms seems to have lost an ear in the incident with his run-in with the steward in season 1's the ball pit car episode, when the ball pit thing it kind of caved in. Like, he seems, I don't know, he's got like a patch where his ear should be in when we see him in season 2. So yeah, he didn't get out of that unscathed, I guess. Yeah, there you go. It's a bit sad, really, but he seems happy enough when we see him in season 2. I think he's holding a jiggle wiggle, as they call it. So yeah, he seems happy enough. But yeah, those are a few little details I noticed. I did also notice that at the end of the episode, so we should talk about the door thing, actually, because the door thing... Oh, is this one gone on longer than usual? Yeah, it has. Typical. How have I managed that? I'm redoing it. It should have been more succinct. Somehow it's less succinct. There's a lot to talk about in this episode, though. That's my excuse. The first recording ended up being over 30 as well. I think the door situation, the door showing up when Ryan's number hit 0 in that moment where he realized when he said he wasn't going to leave Min, I thought it was really clever, and I liked that when he then looked at it in a way that implied he was thinking about leaving Min, that number then went back up and therefore the door disappeared. I can't decide if this is confirming that their numbers can separate or not. So I talked about this in a previous episode, that there was a period of time in which I thought Ryan's number was lower than Min's, which is why he knew Min was also included in this up and down number thing, this whole situation on the train. But there's two explanations for what we saw in this one. They came in through a single door, therefore only a single door will appear when one of them gets it, and they can both go through it because they're linked. But in that moment, I don't think Min learnt anything, and I feel like both of their numbers are going to need to come down to 0 for the doors to appear. So I'm wondering, did Ryan's number hit 0 and Min's number not, and that's why the door appeared? Yeah, which would go back to my idea that these two numbers can drift from each other depending on where each of them is individually. Or in that moment when Min was struggling for his life and Ryan was outside watching it happen, and he said he wasn't going to leave him, did for some reason both of their numbers hit 0 in that moment. I don't know what lesson Min was learning on the inside of that car, but possible. But I think if I was putting money on it right now, I think they may be going down the route of these numbers have been different a couple of times. Although it's worth noting, in the end creditsy bit, their numbers are both at 127 again. They're both matched. So I don't know. I don't know is the honest answer, but it's a great episode ultimately. Really powerful, very, very exciting. Lots of setup for the... Actually, it's just occurred to me, at the end of this episode we see Ryan's number go to 115. Yeah, it's 127 in the title card at the end. So maybe the title cards aren't as directly referenced to the shows. I don't know. Maybe I've been wrong about comparing those two things all along. Anyway, yeah, I thought it was really, really solid. Definitely sets us up for a good last couple episodes. I'm glad they've done this here and not in the second or third to last episode, because this gives us 3 episodes now, 30 minutes to bring this together, and I feel like that's maybe better paced than some of the other seasons have been, where this moment, where the big, the two characters coming to a head, or the story coming to a head in this way, and the end of your second act has come a little bit later. Like, I feel like for Tulip, it was when her lowest moment was when Atticus got gnomed, and I think last season it was with Grace and Simon when they had their big falling out towards the end, and with Lake it was when she lost Jesse. So those all happened, I think, a little later than this, like maybe 1 episode later, like episode 8, not 7. So yeah, I think this is good. This is setting us up for 8, 9, and 10 all sort of having a bit more breathing space to wrap this story up, and that's a good thing. I'm trying to just double check my notes, make sure I haven't missed anything. I think that's everything. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, we'll see where this all goes. I'm very excited, but I am also like, I'm also working tomorrow, so I don't know when I'm going to next be able to record the next one. I'm probably going to watch it in a minute, but I won't be able to record for a couple of days, I don't think. But luckily, I've gotten well ahead. Like, I only think 2 of these have released at the time of me recording number 7. So yeah, I did a lot over the weekend and the early part of the week, and now I'm gonna have to work for a couple of days, so I won't be able to record now till towards the end of the week. So there'll be definitely a couple of day gap, but that's probably a good idea because I feel a bit. I must admit, recording this one, I feel a little bit like exhausted, and maybe that's why I was slower and it took me longer to get through all the content this time because I was just a little less current. I'm just a little bit maybe burnt out. So yeah, maybe it's probably a good idea to get a recharge for a couple of days and then come back to tackle the final 3 episodes. But either way, I'm really enjoying it on the whole. I think, again, I do think it's suffering for its comparisons to such a heightened season. I think if I was... I wish... You know what? I still really want. I'm still curious, but I'm pretty convinced because I'm starting to see a couple of comments creep through into my Twitter timeline as well. I think some people definitely have reacted to this badly, as I suspected they might. The minute they announced this was the last season, I did think, with the trailer, I thought, this doesn't look like this is a very final season. So I think this is going to lead to some disappointment. And I definitely saw a couple of tweets that implied some people weren't happy with it. I think actually maybe there was one comment on the video, one of these videos actually, that someone said they didn't particularly care for the season. I think that was that. Now a couple of them are out. That makes sense. Maybe that's where I saw it. But yeah, it certainly is hinted to me that my early thought that this might have not have gone down 100% well might not be unfounded. But again, it's one of those things. What are your options? I think they'd have been better off. Maybe I think the only way that maybe that this could have gone better or would have been better is if they'd have put it out without announcing it was the final season, which seems a little cruel. But let people enjoy it for what it is, expecting another season, the way that the creators created it, expecting to make another season, and then have it sort of be confirmed that it's cancelled. And people can be mad that this ended up the end through circumstance. But I think people, if they hear it's the end before this season comes out, they assume, I think casual viewers do assume the creative team knew they were writing the last season. So I suspect, or if they didn't, it's going to be hard to just equate. It's going to be hard to like mentally sort of shift your thinking if you know it's the last season going in, because your expectations are just going to be, even if only subconsciously, going to be in a different place to where the season's actually gone. I don't know. You can tell, because I keep bringing it up, how eager I am to dip into like the Discord and Twitter and really dive into how people feel about this one, because I've got my theories on what the reaction has been. So yeah, but either way, really enjoying it, and you'll be glad to hear this time, with only 3 episodes left in the whole run, that I finally remembered to write the name of the next episode down, so I can just do an ending. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Of course, come back tomorrow to hear me discuss the Mega Maze Car.